My name is Erin Black, and the topic of my paper was succession planning. At my company right now, we have a lot of fluctuation in terms of who will be the next CEO, who will be the next president, who will be the next chairman. And there's so much going on with that I was really excited to learn a little bit more about succession planning, figure out how people are doing it and what they're doing, because my experience in succession planning is no one can really define it, but everybody apparently is doing it. So I was very excited to kind of explore the topic, get to know the do's and don'ts, and figure out how people are evaluating what they're actually doing. So my paper begin with an overview. We're going to define succession planning. We're going to really talk about the why. Why use succession planning? Why does it work? We're going to talk about strategy. We're going to talk about the elements of a positive succession plan, how to evaluate that succession plan to make sure it's worth your money, it's worth its value. And it's obviously a hard thing to evaluate since it's not going to happen right away in all cases. And also we'll discuss the future. What's next for succession planning? So first we'll defining a succession plan. And I will tell you that in my research, I found so many definitions of succession planning, and all of them had a common thread, and really that was highlighted in our text. And our text said to ensure the organization is prepared to fill key positions when the incumbents leave for any reason. That definition is supplemented by William Rothwell's definition in effective succession planning and management that said identifying critical management positions starting at the level of project manager and extending all the way up to ensure that individuals achieve greater seniority and that their skills are broadened to become more generalized in relation to total organizational objectives. So you see that some definitions are very vague, some are very specific in terms of what we're looking for. But it's basically the thought, I think that the fear there is that we need to replace this manager overnight. But the goal of succession planning really is to say, what if anyone in this organization left? How would that affect the organization? And what would we do? And it's not just leaving, it's not just death or retirement, but also job hoppers or even just changes in the workforce. So we'll definitely explore that throughout our discussion. Two different kinds of succession planning are usually seen in most cases. Lalitha Naveen actually describes two. I liked her definitions the best. There are two: relay succession and then also horse race succession. Relay succession is going to be the selection of an heir apparent a few years before the CEO is expected to step down. So basically there is a number two person waiting in the wings that's learning from that main CEO and is really getting to know the ropes before that main person steps down. Horse race succession, on the other hand, is exactly as you can imagine in your brain, you have 3 or 4 or more people just running as fast as they can to see whose nose tips that finish line first. So in horse race succession, once the winner is announced, there are many times where unsuccessful candidates typically resign. So that's something to consider in terms of horse race. So there are reasons to do both, and we won't necessarily go into which way is better, but it's important to know that the two types are most commonly seen in these succession plans. Why develop a plan? Today, I would say that the majority of corporations are really thinking baby boomer. When they say we need to have a succession plan, it's because they fear this growing number of retirements. And yes, they should. The number of adults over the age of 65 will increase 35% from approximately 40 million to 54 million between 2010 and 2020, and that's from the CNA Professional Council. That fact is alarming, but it's not the only thing. So yes, we do need to really focus on the retirements that are coming, but it's also a discussion of a shift in population within our workforce. So yes, absolutely, beware the baby boomers, but also pay attention to Generation Y. When we think about Generation Y, a lot of people label this generation as a generation of job hoppers. We talk job loyalty, and also, in terms of technology, this is really going to integrate actually these next three bullets: employee loyalty, technology, and also that Gen Y shift in the population. Gen Y says, I show you love by how hard I work, not how long I stick around. So we know that this Generation Y population is really going to shift the way that we consider loyalty. People are going to work hard because they love the organization, but they're still going to move on in a couple of years. They don't intend to really stay with that organization through retirement. So when we think about succession planning, it's very important to think in terms of Generation Y and also in terms of the baby boomers. So that person, if I'm 33 and I'm coming into my organization, is it me that they're trying to integrate into the succession plan, or is it my position and what my position and talents and skills look like? So that's really a question that we need to consider in why develop a plan. This is happening. Technology, again, with Generation Y, when we look at this, we know that time lost is a very relevant topic these days. Every minute lost costs money, so downtime in any industry will result in reduced results. So if someone retires, you have to post that notice, the candidate has to be located, the candidate has to be hired, and finally trained. And if you're in a position like I am, where we see this constant fluctuation all the time in Generation Y groups, and with the retirements of the baby boomers, HR is constantly working, just trying to keep up. So all of this time lost because of the technological world we live in could really be cut back if we had a strong succession plan program. It's also important to discuss the why in terms of intellectual capital. Intellectual capital is defined by Rothwell as the collective economic value of an organization's workforce. Okay, so in layman's terms, what he's saying is when a long-term employee leaves their position, they take with them the knowledge of how it all came together. So it's not just workplace knowledge, but it's how you built the project you're working on. So for example, here at the bank, we're building a new checking account that is much more, tech savvy, you would say. So if the person who's developing that checking account moves on, then the person that comes in to take over that project is really at a loss to, why did you make this decision? Why did you make that decision? They end up starting over again, and obviously that costs time, and because of the time, it costs money. So it's something that, in terms of intellectual capital, how do you get out the information you need from those key employees? And key employees could be anyone. Once you know the why to why you're developing a succession plan, you really have to think about succession plan strategy. And most of the sources that I consulted, most of them suggested that you really start any process like this with a risk analysis. The risk analysis, as we all know, is a study that identifies areas in the organization with, in this case, with high risk of losing people. This risk analysis is crucial to understand where your risks are, and this will help you to determine who to include and how to build the program and what your results need to be to ensure that your company gets the results it needs. Once the risk analysis process is really complete, the program participants need to be identified. When we talk about the program participants, these should be people that are going to be a part of the development process. So, for example, in my organization, when I want something done or I want to start a program or a process, I go to senior management first and I get every single one of them to say yes. So this question is really saying, who are the people that need to say yes? Who are the people that need to be involved? Who are going to be the people who will participate, who will benefit, and really who will hinder this process? I have one of my objectives usually in these types of situations is to hit the people that are going to hinder the process of my project. I go to them, I win them over, I identify their needs, and I ensure that they are on the train that I want them to be on. So this is part of this discussion. Who are the people that will participate with this? Not necessarily just who will this benefit, but who will participate in developing the process. We also need to consider policies, procedures, and mission. I know that mission statements are important as a director of marketing, but I really forget to include them on a project-by-project basis. It's so important because it places the organization in a clear vision of what they want to complete or establish with this project. Then you go to the policies. This says, in detail, how are you going to support or oppose this position to make sure that it is finished? So if there are certain things that the company is unwilling to do, a policy like this could really establish a document so everybody knows that this project is moving in a direction that everyone's comfortable with. I often think of policies and procedures being written after a program or project is completed to make sure that they can be implemented. But this is saying to develop these policies and procedures in developing the plan just for the development process. It sounds like a lot more work to me, to be honest, but I can see very clearly how a plan as thick and deep as this succession planning process would need something so detailed. So once all of those are established, you're also going to look at your target groups. Target groups in succession planning are the employee groups who will be the focus of the project. To really illustrate this example, we're going to look at Papa John's. They recently participated in a succession planning program and decided to focus on employees in the director level and up. In your organizations, you might look and say, or for example in our bank, we might say succession planning is important on all levels. So we have to decide, where do we start, where do we leave off, what positions are critical and what are not. So we may not work from the ground level up on programs like or in positions with our tellers, but we might work from the ground level up in positions with our IT department. So we really have to think about who's involved and who is this going to really affect, because if we're trying to build futures for some of these employees and their positions, it'll be very important to identify the ones that we need to work on first. Once that plan is developed, we're also going to look at the elements of a plan. So we've gotten a yes, now we're building the plan, everybody's working together really well, we haven't had any roadblocks. What needs to go into our plan to ensure that we come out with the success that we designed? So the first thing we're going to do is develop successors. So when we look at developing successors, we know that they need to be assessed, coached, mentored, and evaluated with a number of different tools. There are vendors out there who can help with this. There are computer programs that help with this. And really at the end of it, assessments are all going to really look different. And that's testing assessments, that's personality assessments, it's job assessments. But I can tell you that most of the places that I researched were using a consultant to really help them with this assessment of successors. So the first thing they're doing is we're developing the successors. We're assessing them, we're assessing their jobs, and we are coaching, mentoring, and evaluating them through this process so that they get to, this is our plan of how they're going to get where we need them to go. But I think, as we all know, unfortunately or fortunately, most programs will not survive on only internal succession. I think, from my perspective, when I think about succession planning, I really thought about internal successors. But recruitment efforts also need to be refined and realigned with the strategic initiatives of the succession plan. In in one survey, Lester B. Korn, who's an executive recruiter, said about 80% of successors to top executive jobs come from within a company. So 20% are coming from the outside. In most organizations, it's necessary to hire externally. And when we look at hiring externally, we need to think about these positions, long-term positions that we're hiring for before we start the hiring process. We also know that we want to integrate all of our processes in HR with the succession planning. So again, you're going to hear integration over and over and over again, and recruitment is a major portion of that. Here's a quote from the University of San Diego. Karen Willis in HRM Today says, organizations can begin to inoculate themselves from the impact of leadership shortages by looking at developing a recruitment system that links every aspect of an employee's career development, beginning with the recruiting action through to the succession plan of the organization. So we see this correlation, we know it's there, but we just really have to start to utilize it and integrate this recruitment with our succession goals. Retention, we talk about this all the time, whether it's customer or employee, but in this case, obviously, employee. Retention is a significant piece. Why do these employees leave? Why do others stay? How are you going to integrate retention into the succession plan? Like we talked about earlier, Generation Y, retention is different than it was 30 years ago. There's not, as a member of Generation Y, it is not my intention to stay at this corporation forever. It doesn't even come into my mind. This is a great place to learn, to develop my skills, but there is a what's next for me, and I think most of my peers are in that same boat. So I don't think that they hope to, I would hope that my organization is not hoping to retain me to retirement, but I hope that they get as much out of me as they can while I'm here. So we really have to incorporate that discussion. One thing that a Gallup poll said was that retention must be integrated with succession planning to ensure the training, coaching, and mentorship instilled in the existing population is able to deliver it to aid in the future success of the organization. So even though we know that they're not going to stay forever, we do want to get as much as we can, as much leverage as we can out of the training and coaching and mentorship. We also need to talk about the integration of technology in our plan. Technology is integrated to make the written plan successful. We know that 55%, according to Corporate Productivity's Succession Management Survey, 55% use new technologies for succession planning. So step one is to really create this written plan, but step two is to integrate it in a technology interface that is going to be utilized by the entire corporation. As we know, if everyone doesn't have access and isn't involved in this whole process, then they're not going to be a participant in its success. So it's very important to integrate the technology early. Of course, once we have established our plan, one of the most important things is to evaluate. Everybody says it all the time, but nobody does it, I feel like. When we talk about the plan, we need to make sure that we have established goals in the beginning, like we talked. If we don't have any established goals, then we don't have any way of knowing if we met those goals. So goals established, firm goals that we can measure ourselves against later. One of the tools of evaluation is a balanced scorecard. A balanced scorecard is designed to extend beyond financial goals and consists of 4 categories: financial, customer, business process, and learning and growth. These scorecards, obviously, in terms of the customer customer bullet on there, customers could be internal or external. It's really making sure that the plan is covering all of our bases. And you can totally see that with a balanced scorecard, that could be used across the organization. We also have dashboards, and I think most of our organizations utilize or want to utilize some sort of dashboard that just has information at your fingertips. In terms of human resource metrics that could be integrated into this, They would really result from the goals that we established in the beginning. Again, it's the succession plan producing results by linking initial objectives with the dashboard designed to display the appropriate metrics. Executives, board members, and employees can quickly communicate the results of their ongoing efforts. We want to realize the full effect of this process. And so in order to do that, we need to make sure we're evaluating on a continuous basis, because as you know, succession planning is not a one-stop project. I mean, this is an ongoing initiative that in theory will create success, but it will continue rolling. It'll be a rolling success over the years. So we want to see that full effect and if it's working or not. Finally, we talk about the future of succession planning. What's going to happen next? One of the things that we really think about is that increased participation in succession planning in general will definitely be seen in the coming years. In 1980, let's see, his name is hard, but last name is Alpander, has said that provided evidence suggesting that there was a significant correlation between the number of employees and the advanced planning to fill executive positions. In other words, smaller companies were less likely than their larger counterparts to participate in succession planning. So small companies really aren't doing it, but big companies are. 26 years later, in 2006, Naveen, that we mentioned earlier, agreed 26 years later that a firm's propensity to groom an internal candidate for the CEO position is related to firm size. So we know that small companies are not doing this yet, large companies are, and we all know that the large companies will continue to build on that, and small companies will try to catch up. So we think we'll see increased participation, particularly amongst the small companies. We will see more diversity in succession planning. It is not just important to have a successor, but what do those successors look like? In full disclosure, in our company, we're putting together a piece, and there are no Asian people in our workforce at all. We have African American, we have Caucasian, we have all kinds of different people within those two groups, but we don't have any Asian and Indian or Indian population at all. So when we look at diversity, what does our CEO C-suite look like without those players? If we're going to try to attract those customers, we need to exhibit some of those types of people in our workforce. So something to consider. All right. Also, we want to consider, sorry about that, we want succession planning to be seamlessly integrated. So in the future, succession planning won't necessarily be a topic of discussion. It will just be integrated. One of the Rothwell says that it will be so consistently integrated into processes and will evolve from a number of solutions. So people won't say succession planning. They'll just be taught. It'll just be. And that's a really interesting way to think about it because it is such a hot topic right now. Really, in conclusion, I think we've learned that succession planning is key to the success of an organization. Start now. Don't wait. Even if there is no need for a successor in terms of retirement, that succession plan could be helping with general turnover and really solve some of those retention issues. You need to track data and success to make sure that the data that you're tracking today can be utilized in future succession planning initiatives. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation on succession planning. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. And again, I think that the bottom line on succession planning is that we know its importance, we know that it works, we know that it benefits our entire organization, and really just have to have a clear plan on how we're going to achieve it and then record those results just like in any application. Again, thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to email. Thanks again.